Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about last week. I'm always apologising when I do these things. Essentially, last week was just one of those really, really busy weeks, and then I had to work Saturday as well. So I wasn't in very good shape, and last night I was going to do the stream, and then it just kind of like, by the time I'd got through this week, I was just dead on my arse, and it would have been me like this. But for 3 hours, well, nearly 4 hours. I figured it would probably be best just to leave it till today. I've been sleeping on and off all day today. I've completely wasted the day, but it's a pretty moist day out today. So I'm kind of like looking at the day and going, it's not really much to be bothered with, although I still have to start the Exorcist 3 review, so I'm going to be trying to get my arse in gear with that and get that going and all that kind of stuff. Same as usual then, Glenn. Yes, it is. It's incredibly busy at work at the moment. It's just I've taken so much extra stuff on my plate, and I'm just like kind of like, I get to the end of the week, I'm like oh dear. Kira says, I know we like niche films, but it warms my heart knowing there are other weirdos in a good way like us who upload the said movies to the YouTube channels. Yes, but always try to support the folks that do the physical media. Obviously, I have my copy of Blue Velvet. I have actually just ordered the Blu-ray with all the extended footage, which is part of what we're going to be watching tonight. So I encourage everyone who doesn't already own it. It's cheap on Amazon at the moment. It's only like £8 for the Blu-ray. So go for it if you can afford it. Might not stay for the watch long since I'll be working short as early as 8 in the morning and splitting headache. You do what you need to do, Kieran, and I hope your headache clears up. So yeah. Let's just go for a few pickups before we get started and all that sort of stuff. Link is just at the top of the chat, so if you zoom to the top of the chat, you will find the link to the film there. It seems to be quite a good copy. I'll talk about that in a moment now. But I picked up the Die Hard quadrilogy on Blu-ray, and quite frankly, I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's only really the first two films that are worthwhile, but the box set was relatively cheap. So I've got my fix of Bruce Willis when he was in his good days. I picked up this as well, which is Crash of the Titans. I'd never heard of that before. Been playing a bit of it. It's a bit like it's like 50% Crash. It's kind of weird. It doesn't feel entirely like a Crash game, but yeah, it's not awful. Yeah, I don't know about that for that game. It's a little bit sort of late, trying desperately to kind of shove new stuff in. But it's free on YouTube, Glenn. Yes, it is. But you've got to support the the physical media if it's available. And I am a collector as well, and I always encourage people to actually get hold of the things if you can. Shouldn't just rely on somebody illegally uploading things, because that's not going to do anybody any favours, not unless the laws change significantly. You're upgrading your other Lynch to blue. Oh, excellent. Die Hard 3 is good. It's a bit fudgy to me. There's bits I like about Die Hard 3. There's a lot I don't like about it either, but there you go. I'm looking to at some point do a review on Death Laid an Egg, because it is such a bizarre movie. I got it on the strength of the title. It's kind of Giallo-esque sort of. I'm not sure if it's actually a full-on Giallo. Actually, I think it is. Bizarre film in some respects. There's a lot of actual focusing on eggs. It's sort of set in a kind of like a hen factory kind of thing. Apart from anything else, it's very strange. It's very strange. I picked up this recently. Came via eBay, but it was packed so badly it's got a fucked up spine, unfortunately, but the disc is okay, so I could have sent it back, but couldn't be bothered. And I picked up Possessor because as you might have known on Facebook, I did actually watch this film. I enjoyed it. Not everybody seems to enjoy it. I did. So I found it a little bit derivative, kind of like borrowing from his dad's filmography and a few things besides. I didn't mind it though. I thought it was a pretty decent film. And I've got another one of his sort of turning up at some point, which should be kind of good. Speaking of CC, you need to do Beyond the Darkness by D'Amato, another one of his better movies. Oh, right, okay. I was so close to actually kind of starting a specific series on D'Amato like I did with Jess Franco, but I never quite got round to it. He's an interesting director. A lot of people sort of go, why do you have any interest in those directors? And it's like, there are genuinely some very fascinating things going on with some of these directors, not least how their sort of careers panned out in many different directions. There's so much cable on this bloody set of headphones. But yeah. Possessor is trippy as fuck. Yes, it is. It's really got that kind of a lot of the vibes of his dad, but it's not completely sitting on his shoulders either. So didn't know there was a 4K though. This isn't a 4K. This is just the regular. I hope so. Otherwise, I won't be able to play it. Oh dear. Yeah. I thought I'd show you this thing because I thought this is quite amusing. I picked this up over the last few weeks. I got a 2x extender for my camera, but I picked up this socking great big lens. The size of this damn thing. So now I've got like hyper telephoto lens, and it's pretty cool. Not cheap, it has to be said. Although a lot cheaper going that line because it's second hand. A lot cheaper going that line, but I'm looking forward to sort of getting out and actually sort of doing a little bit of experimenting with that thing because it might be kind of cool. Do a little bit of wildlife photography or something like that. But it's so frigging heavy. Once you got the camera on and everything like that, the camera is the light part of that whole kind of setup, and it has to have a balancing point actually on the lens itself because the lens is that big and heavy. So that'll be a joy to carry around. But I'm looking forward to actually giving it a try and see what results I get. Kind of experimenting with my hobbies and all that kind of stuff. How is everyone in the UK going with petrol? Last time I watched the news, I was laughing my head off at it. Army on the streets. Yeah, you know what? He's putting out like 200 drivers, his Boris, which I think is a real token effort, to say the least. Things are sort of settling down because I think people are starting to get into a pace of kind of how to deal with it. But yes, it's an utterly ridiculous situation, unfortunately. So, what with that and a whole bunch of other stuff. I know Europe's having, the continent is having some problems as well, but not to the extent that we've got. But we've just kicked a whole bunch of potential workers out of the country. So what you gonna do? Dear, oh dear. James Franco from Spider-Man, an interesting director. What? I don't think I've seen any films directed by James Franco. Yeah. So we won't waste too much time on this one, just simply because this is quite a long one, and I think we'll start losing people if we don't kind of try to aim to get in before midnight, so to speak. So everybody start kind of queuing yourselves up, and we'll get started within the next few minutes. One of the other films I was thinking of doing, I keep saying this, but one of the things I'm thinking of doing a review at some point, it would be I Spit on Your Grave, Deja Vu. Mixed bag of a film. Some people really hate it. Some people thought it was alright. I think it's sort of... some things are okay, some things are not so much. It's a kind of weird film. It's very oddly pitched in some ways. Gets a little bit crazy. But yeah. Jess Franco, not James Franco. Oh dear. Oh, I think I must have missed the first comment on that, but yeah. Yeah, Jess Franco. Did I? Surely I didn't say that. But yeah. Anyway, get the Pabst Blue Ribbon opened. Oh my god, that's some low rent shite. Currently, I am on Kentish Ale, Shepherd Neame, and they seem to have been kind of like they've got into bed with Sainsbury's because it's now like one of the Sainsbury's brands. Not a terrible thing, but it does make it a little bit more difficult to get hold of. On a totally unrelated topic, I saw Angela the Fireworks Woman in my local CEX. You really? Tell you what, Kerry, if you see if next time you pop back in there, if that's in there, would you pick it up for me? And I will happily PayPal to ship it over and all that kind of stuff if it's affordable. Because I would absolutely love to have that on DVD. How the fuck is that in CEX? I had no idea that even had a DVD release. That was Angela the Fireworks Woman. I've mentioned it on plenty of times before, but not everybody knows what it is. It's basically Wes Craven's second film, I think it was. I think it, he did. I think it. Not Wes Craven's. Yes, it was Wes Craven's. It was after Last House on the Left. So that film was a little bit obscure, to say the least, because it was essentially a porn film. And it's actually quite an interesting one. It is one that actually has a certain amount of sort of artistic kind of approach to it. It's a bit weird, and it's kind of strange seeing a film like that when you've got David Hess's music from Last House going off on it, and all this weirdness. And Wes Craven actually does appear in it, but not in a shall we say performing role. Yeah. So if you see that in there, definitely grab it for me. Was it with Sean Cunningham? I couldn't honestly tell you off the top of my head. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Okay, folks, start giving me a thumbs up when you're ready, and we'll get cracking with the movie. I'm going to go ahead with the assumption that my brother is lurking in the background somewhere. So, didn't Craven start out making porn films anyway? He didn't make a lot of them. I think I think Angela is the only one that I know of. I think it was just. I think it was just that one off the top of my head. Many of the directors were doing that. It wasn't just him. It was like Abel Ferrara, and a whole bunch of them were kind of doing naughty films in the background just to stay afloat. Apart from anything else, nice and cheap to make. Doesn't take an awful lot of effort, and will sell enough to cover the production costs and make a bit of money. Yeah, and Angela, I think, was after Last House. So, I did things like that don't appear. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got Kerry's got a thumbs up. Anybody else? Just give us a couple, and then we'll get started with this 2 hours and 48 minutes of Lynchian goodness. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing this. Be aware, like I said, this is the this is basically a fan edit. This one, right? So it might be a bit kind of choppy in places where they've installed the extra footage. So I don't know how that's going to turn out. I wasn't going to sit and watch the entire damn film and figure it out. So Coppola, Avildsen, Rocky director, began with softcore movies. Many did. Ferrera's was a hardcore. 9 Lives of Wet Pussy. Delightful name. I was so close at one point to doing doing something kind of documentary kind of sort of approach to that era of porn making, the golden age of porn making, because it's actually a really fascinating subject apart from anything else. But I never quite got around to doing that. I think I've mentioned it before. I've got a copy of Deep Throat up on my shelf somewhere, but it's the 18 version. It's a BBFC 18 certificated one, which I assume they allowed simply because of the historical context, but it is digitally reframed and all this kind of stuff to really kind of cut out all the stuff you're kind of going to be there for. You know what I mean? So, when's the visitor queue watch along, Glenn? I can't say I ever thought about it. You know where to go for that. Put those suggestions up. One thing that's annoying me is on the Ramble-Aholics I can't pin posts. So, yeah, I want to put a suggestion post and have it pinned to the top. I might have to do that on my main page, maybe. Ah, dear. Right, okay. I'm going to assume that you guys are all ready because I've only got one thumbs up. So you've got 60 seconds before we start this thing. Because otherwise I will be here till, past midnight and I will turn into a pumpkin. Yeah, we're not Richard. You're more than welcome to host your own, though. Yeah, go for it. I might even sort of pop in for 5 minutes to see the look of horrors. Speaking of real sex, I finally watched In the Realm of the Senses the other day. Quite explicit film. Yes, it is. Very difficult one. There's one shot which is digitally altered, or at least kind of reframed, in that to conform with British censorship, and that's a bit near the end, which has a naked child in the shot, and because the girl is supposed to be, she's become corrupted by her behaviour and the excesses that she's gone to. And one of the ways they sort of demonstrate that, she very spitefully just kind of goes, grabs his winky and sort of yanks it a little bit. And nothing sexual or anything like that, but just being kind of cruel to the little boy. And that shot got kind of digitally altered, so you couldn't see the act. But yeah, brilliant. Okay, right, let's go then, folks. Stand by your beds. We're going to go on 5 and start on go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. I would say to anybody who's kind of, if there is anyone new to the streams, because I get this comment quite often, that, I'll be talking half about the film and whatever the hell is going on in the chat. It's very loosey-goosey here, so don't expect too much. Yeah, that scene is really dodgy. Can't believe they got away with that shit. And the thing is, it's winky, yeah. Hey, look, I'm trying to appease the YouTube algorithm to at least a little bit. And it was a winky. It's a little kid, so... Mad foxes, calamity of snakes, grumbling of spiders, tutting of beavers. Tutting of the beavers, I would definitely watch. Although it does sound vaguely like we're getting into the realm of porn again. It's got a wonderful kind of musical sort of feel to it, hasn't it, its opening? It's one of those things I've never really sort of expressed, I think, is it does feel like the overture to a theatre musical. I think David Lynch paid very, very good money for his font on this opening. You don't think this film would be as good without Dennis Hopper? I wouldn't necessarily say that. He is fantastic in this, don't get me wrong. But he brings a very unique kind of energy to his role. That's not to say that somebody else couldn't have done it very, very differently. In fact, there's aspects of his performance within this that that he kind of regrets. One of the things that was apparently going to happen was the gas he was huffing on, which you can kind of assume is some sort of laughing gas mix or something like that, was going to be like helium. But he kind of didn't want that. He was kind of against that as an approach. I've always loved this opening, and I've talked about it in the commentary track that I did and all that sort of stuff. But there is this this thing that David Lynch does, particularly when it comes to the kind of imagery. You've had that image of the gun coming on the television as this sort of implication of violence and all that kind of stuff, and then you've got the hose pipe, which is sort of backing up and all that kind of stuff and being tightened, because this guy's like having like a stroke or an aneurysm. So that's the kind of thing that would be going on in the body. So it kind of externalizes all this sort of stuff that's going on. But then you sort of go into the kind of the nitty gritty of the world. You have this sort of picture postcard thing going on, and then it goes into the dirt where you start to see the kind of the threatening and violence nature of nature of the world that you're in. That there is this thing sort of happening in the undergrowth of this seemingly perfect society. It's incredibly disturbing in a very weird way. It's not one of those that you sort of like watch and go, oh my god, that's horrific, in the same way that you would a regular horror scene. But it really does, when you start to feel that scene, it really does become apparent that there's this underlying horror. And of course, we've got Kyle MacLachlan here, who's our hero for this film. And of course, what's he doing? He's a peeping Tom. So he's this all-American kind of child. So it's all a bit kind of creepy. I'm sorry, but helium would have made those scenes unintentionally hilarious. To some extent, but you would have got that contrast of a much higher contrast of kind of like hysterical and ridiculous with the absolute violence that Frank as a character is given to commit. So it could have worked, but I think in some respects it's also potentially better just to ground it down a little bit, because Dennis Hopper's performance in this is really dialed up. It's not generally subtle. There are subtleties in there, but it is a full-on in-your-face thing. Duality is a common trope of Lynch and the seedy underbelly against the clean-cut surface, yes. Yeah, you're quite right, Kerry. I mean, I'd have to pull a name out of my arse here a little bit, but you could have had any number of actors could have brought something really kind of out there to that particular thing. I mean, can you imagine if Frank Silva, who played Killer Bob, or someone did that kind of role? Although, he was essentially a set dresser, wasn't he? At the time when he kind of like got pulled into the Twin Peaks cast. Dennis Hopper, when he does his thing in this particular film, is like I say, it's very dialed up. It's a very amped up performance, and it is Dennis Hopper in non-subtle mode. Not that he often does subtle, but even for him, it's really kind of ramped up. Hopper plays Booth as a very unhinged and OTT, which goes against the typical Lynch antagonist. Yeah, I guess. There's. I'm trying to think of other antagonists, but I guess Lynch does often kind of like really sort of ramp up the protagonists quite a lot more. I love the soundtrack to this. It's everything about this is kind of there's a feeling of that like 1950s 1960s kind of soap opera. This is a real kind of precursor to Twin Peaks in so many respects. And that includes the sort of melodramatic kind of thing. But with Twin Peaks and stuff like that, it was very much a case of that stuff was kind of told through the medium of the television. So there is one of these film theory videos, which is absolutely fascinating. I'm not 100% on board with it, but I kind of loved the way it was sinking. But looking at Twin Peaks as in and of itself. Being this recreation of a TV world, so it's like a TV world in a TV show, if you know what I mean. It's sort of Lynch's kind of layers upon layers kind of thing going on. Lost Highway is still one of those films that I kind of struggle with. I just think the writing seemed to have got a bit lost. It's still a hell of a film, it's still quite something to experience, and in that respect I would say it was not a bad film by any respect, but I think it's probably one of the more troubled David Lynch films, other than perhaps Dune. Yeah, Lynch said a lot of his work goes back to his childhood in the 50s. Yeah, it's very apparent that he does have that kind of thing going on. Certainly you can tell it through the music and that kind of stuff. But just in the way he kind of tells the stories, it very much does hark back to the entertainment of those days. It's just told through generally a less Vaseline-coated lens. And it's kind of exaggerated in a lot of ways. It's really kind of cool. Timestamp, yeah. Hello, Greg. 10:33. You don't get it either. No, and I think that's the thing. I think the story is a little bit wayward with Lost Highway. But again, it's not a bad film. It's just I think it's one of the least coherent films in many respects. Not that it necessarily is a problem for David Lynch, because there's other things which his films offer. Certainly through the kind of like how it deals with characters and stuff like that, and this sort of dreamlike aesthetic that a lot of his stuff has. Oh, Defoe, that is a really good suggestion. See, I really do like Willem Dafoe, because he really tends to just kind of like be all over the place with the roles that he does. He's very adventurous when it comes to that stuff. Sometimes he can be batshit crazy, and other times he can be wonderfully straight, and he is a damn fine actor, I think, even when he's in a bad role. I do love it when he hams shit up. It's kind of fun. Music and soundtracks and all that kind of stuff are very important to David Lynch. He is very careful with what he does. Whether it's that sort of fuzzy kind of world between diegetic and non-diegetic, that his worlds tend to kind of like cross between. So you've got stuff like "Crying," the song "Crying" in Mulholland Drive, for instance, which it in that scene in the theatre where it turns out that they're not actually singing it, it's kind of a backing track and kind of fucks with you that sort of way. He's a fascinating guy, very disorientated, deliberately disorientating sometimes. Defoe is a great actor. I did study a little bit of his early work, his stage work, with the Wooster Group. New York based, I believe. Yeah, New York based group. Who did very, very odd stuff, a bit like this. It's kind of abstract sort of theatre or improvisation or all that kind of stuff. Kind of weird, bit out there, quite challenging. But very similar in some respects to a company called Forced Entertainment from Britain. I love Carl McLachlan in this. I like him in pretty much everything he does. He always has a certain charm to him. I find his kind of real life personality is very entertaining as well. He just absolutely embraces this stuff that he's done. And David Lynch has always found something very special in him as an actor, clearly. But he has that sense of innocence as well as this sort of hidden quality to him. There's always something in the background that can be potentially dangerous. And like with Dale Cooper, for instance, he's a character that you could go, he's American as apple pie, a very sweet young man, yada yada yada, but he's also capable of killing you. Rick says, I always found it interesting how Lynch got great performances from not traditionally great actors, e.g. Twin Peaks. I don't know if I wouldn't say that Carl McLachlan's not a great actor, but I think he's a very specific type of actor. Maybe he doesn't have the hugest of range, but he does have charm. And that's kind of important. Naomi Watts, she's. I think she is legitimately a bloody good actress, but she hasn't really had too many roles where she's been able to shine. I mean, I love her in Mulholland Drive particularly. She just does that really kind of dialed up kind of thing really, really well. But again, a lot of the characters that sort of occur in David Lynch's films have this sort of quality, this duality quality of being very straight-laced, all-American type character or caricatures almost. and but they also have this underlying kind of propensity for violence. Here. Laura Dern, fresh from Mask, really hit big time with this. Another actress, so I think she's often underrated. Wild at Heart is one of those films that is a little bit kind of even more extreme in its kind of tonality. And we haven't done that as a watch along, I don't think. I'll have to see if we can do that at some point. Obviously, you've got Nick Cage, and actually, perfect role for Nick Cage, I think. One where he can let loose and not seem completely out of place. But there's an actor that's making a real kind of resurgence. A lot of people sort of love him for the potentially the wrong reasons. And he's very divisive in those kind of respects, but yeah. I kind of felt awful for Laura Dern after the Star Wars appearance. She was getting a lot of shit for that. I've always been less inclined to blame the actors for films like that than the writers and directors. I mean, Lynch gets performances from certain actors no other director does. The thing is with Lynch, he's a very generous director. He has a very particular kind of view of what he's after. But he's open to opportunities and open to collaboration, and I think that's why he works with the same actors an awful lot. You've got this sort of David Lynch extended family, a lot of whom have passed away, during or after the making of the Twin Peaks: The Return. Some of the most wonderful people that you can imagine, from what I can tell. And David Lynch seems to like that kind of collaboration. He likes to have a very harmonious relationship with the actors. Because, let's face it, he's often asking for some very extreme stuff from them in terms of the performances and all that kind of stuff. And for the actors to have trust in the director and kind of like a friendship, and in fact it goes beyond trust really. It's a real close relationship with the director, so he can ask some very crazy sounding stuff of them. I'd agree, though, Bruce Willis being an exception to that rule, yes. Absolutely, there are exceptions to that rule. There are some actors who are very, either not that committed to what they're doing or very pig-headed about what they're doing. Sometimes that's for the better. Sometimes most often it's for the worse. And I was so sad with Bruce Willis because I used to really, really enjoy him as an actor. And he's just got progressively more like, oh, this is my day job. It's like, surely you've got enough money, man. McLaughlin in Showgirls, though, yikes. I don't think you can blame any one of those actors for that. In fact, Verhoeven himself was very much kind of going, they did what I asked them to. And, if you watch Showgirls with an open mind, you can kind of see some of what he was trying to do. It just got buried in this kind of weird this weird kind of thing that Verhoeven does, but just got out of hand with this particular movie. So I don't think it's like one of the world's, one of the all-time bad films. I just think it's a film that kind of got away from them. Willis doesn't care anymore. No, he doesn't, and it's really, really sad. Occasionally, you do see him in a role where he actually looks like he's enjoying himself, like Glass was the last one that I saw him where he actually looked like he was enjoying himself. And it's a shame the film didn't kind of pan out as well as it could have done. You could tell he didn't care at all in the Death Wish movie remake. Yeah. I do occasionally learn, Kieran. I do try to make an effort to pronounce those things correctly. Again, we've got this sort of shot with David Lynch. He does that whole kind of like, kind of panning right in, well, zooming right in, and zooming into completely inappropriate places. Sometimes does it in reverse. It's always that bit where Leland had been arrested in Twin Peaks, and the opening of the episode it looks like a tunnel, a really kind of weird sort of tunnel, and then as it comes out, you realise it's actually just a hole in a ceiling tile. It sort of pulls it out. Oh, absolutely, Richard. I would love to do that one. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but I'm going to guess it's Borashik. That's the sort of name I would be kind of like going on Google and trying to kind of figure out through the pronunciation things. Borashik. Mm. So many people get my name wrong anyway. So, I don't know how they can't pronounce my name, but a lot of people have a trouble with that. Google Translate settings. Of course, it is the of Borashik. I always forget. Yeah, no, because I tried to do that on the rush. If I slowed down, the W in the name of that kind of from that part of the world is usually a V, and often the V's are kind of like a W, like vodka would be vodka. It's more my surname, particularly when my surname was different. As a kid, I had a different surname. Hello, Simon. It was good to see you looking so happy in that photo of you with your costuming. I loved Negan behind you. That was spot on. The Negan was spot on. Terrifyingly so. But great photo. I love how this film essentially turns out to be this kind of like, it develops into this really perverse kind of Hardy Boys type adventure. Again, it's borrowing from Lynch's kind of childhood. Most people can't spell my name right. Even my relatives often spell it wrong. Some just the breadth of languages and the idiosyncrasies of each one are quite wonderful, even with English. I can thoroughly understand why some people really want to kind of like study that stuff on a really in-depth level. God, Laura Dern is cute as hell in this. It has to be said. She has that really kind of 1950s high school girl kind of vibe going on. That would be telling. Put it this way, this is my birth name. The one I've got. I still hold that Laura Dern's most interesting performance has to be in Inland Empire. That film is one that took the longest time to grow on me. It's quite an alienating film in so many respects, but yeah. Yes, I did have a listen to it. Thank you, Greg. I'm glad it's doing well. Hopefully it's got you a few subscribers along the way. You know, got a little bit of attention to your channel, because your channel does deserve that attention. Remind me later, or tomorrow, Greg, and I'll repost the link on Facebook and Twitter from my channels. This very quirky kind of, like I mentioned the music before, but it's like in this scene, it's this music is always sort of playing in the background. It's very orchestral, very almost 1940s kind of melodrama kind of feel to it. It's the sort of thing you would expect on something like Gone with the Wind or something like that. It's a very old-fashioned style of soundtrack. No, I thought it was funny as hell. For that, just to put that in context, what Greg's talking about there is this. We were talking about a Serbian film, and there's the bit where Miloš fucks the bald guy in the eye. But you know me, I'm always all about the allegory and that kind of stuff. It's like, why is this scene in here and that kind of stuff. So I always struggle with the credibility on kind of like saying there is an actual point to this kind of thing. But yes, that one in particular was kind of a little bit, I would say, in your face, but that might be in bad taste. I don't know, Greg. I hope he does. But I hope we've still got plenty of time with that wonderful man on the planet. Simon, you're in Facebook jail. Oh, God. You seem to attract people that like to flag you. Doesn't take much, does it, Richard? It's one of the funny things about this character. He's already been seen to be this peeping Tom kind of person. You know, he was quite happy to sit there and watch these his two schoolmates getting it on until things got a little bit kind of wonky. So he's a bit of a pervert, but he does have a sense of justice, which is actually that scene is a perfect setup for this character in many ways. Just because of, you know, where he goes from here, it's kind of just an extension of that. David Lynch is very, very good at setting these things up. You, Richard, who would have thought it? I'm going to grab another bottle of beer. Right back. Last film I saw in the cinema was Titane? I mean Titanic? I don't know. I've literally just sent off an email to try and get my subscription to the cinema cancelled. I'm just not interested in going to the cinema anymore. If there's any films I want to watch, I'll just pay for them individually, because quite frankly I'm spending best part of 17 quid, and most months I've just got nothing I want to watch. Can you imagine if only 20% of Hollywood's output was like this film? How much more entertaining it would be. I think a big part of the problem with things like Facebook and stuff like that is you don't necessarily know what's going to offend people, or if you're just being a bit edgy and or even just making a joke, it can offend somebody. So it's what you're going to do. All right, Kieran, I hope you feel well soon. I've got to rewatch Raw at some point. I saw it once. Although, having said that, because it's called Raw, I'm also thinking now of Raw. The film with all the big cats. Easily one of the most irresponsible films ever made. Yeah, you got to be careful when you're doing humour. Not because everybody's a snowflake, but sometimes because humour is very difficult to translate into writing. What's going on in your head is often sounds so damn different to what other people will read. So it can be very difficult to kind of pitch that sort of thing. It's a shame in some respects that you have to be so careful, because then you're self-censoring. But I always find if you're doing anything like that, it's always a good idea to just sort of take a few minutes and kind of like go, how would somebody else read this? You like to Raw, the Eddie Murphy film. Oh God, I remember that from back in the day. That was one of those things you couldn't listen to too loud at home, because you know you didn't want your parents hearing Eddie Murphy effing and blinding. Then I help you there, Simon. I think it's probably just one of those crappy things you're gonna have to just sit through, unfortunately. Oh yeah, I know. I know the one you mean. That's the one I've got to rewatch at some point. But always in my head, I'm kind of like, I say that and instantly I'm thinking about Melanie Griffith almost getting scalped. For real. Very sure I've got it on DVD. It's up there somewhere. Hmm. Boney M. That's a blast from the past. If I remember rightly, one of the singers in that didn't actually sing. It was actually one of the very white producers that actually did that. And somebody mentioned Grizzly 2 earlier on. It's like because Laura Dern was actually in that film, and I believe they just released it on Blu-ray. I think like last year, and it's a shame. I'm not going to go out and buy it because I think the person that actually produced that was such a complete and utter arsehole that I wouldn't want her to get the money. She was pretty goddamned abysmal. She was copyright striking an awful lot of the work cut prints that were knocking around. And bear in mind, on the strength of that work cut print being out, there was actually a lot of interest in the film. So people would have bought that film regardless, but no, she wasn't interested. And it was rough and ready, with incomplete effects and all that kind of stuff. But it's astonishing how many very famous actors are actually in that film, including Laura Dern and quite a few others. Really, Iris? At the time I was listening to that, I was listening to stuff like Ben Elton and all that kind of stuff, an equally sweary guy. I do remember sitting in a class at school, kind of working away, and I had my headphones on while I was doing my work, and listening to Motivation. Try not to laugh too hard. Back in the days when I used to buy vinyl, had a Motivation, both on vinyl. Todd Latine or Sam Neill. I'm assuming the youngest. Did have to steer through a shower of spires. Funny it didn't make the news. Okay. It's funny with because like I say, this film Blue Velvet is almost like it could almost be a prequel to, or at least a kind of dry run for Twin Peaks in some respects, and you do get a certain attention to little bits of media here and there. It's always those things. It's like the TV is focused on in the opening. It's focused on there. It's focused on in a few little parts in the film. It's not much, but it's a suggestive thing, I think. I have to say we're quite lucky with this version on YouTube. It's a pretty nice quality version. Seems we've got another Roadhouse. See that shot is, I mean, it's like these days it kind of it comes close to reminding me of Birdemic with all the kind of parking scenes. It's a very extended shot. That shot of them just pulling up, you'd kind of expect almost to be kind of done and dusted, but it's 30 or 40 seconds long, that. Drinking and driving? The horror. If this isn't a Lynchian moment, I don't know what is. That's what's on the stage. You probably just freaked somebody out, Simon. That's, and they may have taken that in the wrong vein as well. Like I say, it's one of those things. It doesn't always translate what you're thinking and put down on those pages doesn't always translate to what people are reading. If you want a good example of postmodern thinking, then not that what they did was right, especially considering the nature of that page. I'm wondering what the point of that it is. I mean, when I kind of look at that, David Lynch often is very happy to play with this kind of sense of mundanity. And certainly presenting that sort of mundanity in the kind of context of people will sit and watch this shit. It's the eternal problem, isn't it? Uh, it's alright, Simon. But yeah, once again, we've got the whole kind of red. I was going to say red tabs because that's the sort of lingo of what I do for a living. But the red curtains, the pleated red curtains. David Lynch loves to play with that kind of imagery. He loves to play with the whole kind of idea of theatre and the different kind of acting conventions that you would get in theatre. In some respects, you can actually kind of like go with the various performances that he does actually get out of people. It is a very theatrical style of performance. It's very big. It's very upfront. It's performing to the people in the back row, but it's not. There's nobody in the back row. Obviously, it's a camera. Timestamp, we are at 50 minutes and 30 seconds. Jesus. Do kind of get the feeling that, if you were sat there in the audience watching this and loving it, what is wrong with you? Very welcome. I love the look on Laura Dern's face when she's like hearing these jokes. It's like kind of. Boom tish, yes. How would you not be rip roaring drunk at this point of the evening and had to sit through 10 minutes of watching a dog eat its dinner and probably one of the worst stand-up comedian acts you're ever likely to see. As bad as it is, still better than Britain's Got Talent or Strictly Come Dancing on Saturday Night, probably. At least you got alcohol on tap there. Excuse me. Angelo Badalamenti on the piano. Apparently Isabella Rossellini was so nervous about doing this scene. I mean, it's clear that she's not particularly a singer. I think she does a great job with, kind of like really selling it and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think anyone could really say like, it's voice of the year or nothing like that. But she was really, really scared about doing this apparently. So Angelo Badalamenti kind of like sat in on the scene to help her out because she trusted him enough to kind of help her out. And she's certainly not a, she's not known for singing. She's not something that she does. So you can imagine, yeah. I think anybody would be nervous. Very Lynchian kind of end to that song, though, isn't it? The lighting and everything. It is one of those things I pointed out in other David Lynch films. His lighting is very theatrical. You got the theatrical kind of curtains and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of weird in some respects because he does really kind of play with these kind of different types of media and these different types of performance elements. Whether it be the stage or whether it be overtly old films and old television and kind of the music that he chooses and all that sort of stuff. But the lighting is always something I find fascinating with David Lynch's films, whether it's Eraserhead, whether it's Wild at Heart, whether it's Inland Empire, which is kind of extreme with what it does, and this, which sort of dips it's almost like kind of the world shifts in this film from much more naturalistic kind of scenes like this into these scenes like in that we just seen with Isabella Rossellini singing, that are very overtly kind of theatrical. Yeah, you're quite right, Stas. My Lord really does get that 19 kind of 50s sort of look down. lot of talk of early 1980s entertainment going on. I do remember 321. It was always very important. You never got the kind of 3, 2, 1 thing the wrong way round. I was talking about all the lighting and stuff like that. I mean, this scene is a very, very dark scene. It's very softly lit. Sort of film noir kind of feel to it. It's very bold, isn't it, to go wandering around somebody's apartment and kind of go, yeah, I need a piss, I'm just going to... Not only that, actually flush the toilet. Oh, they were really popular back in the day. See, now his Peeping Tom game is getting a lot more serious. I think you must be ahead of us, Richard. Because he's only on the phone at the moment, unless that's what you... Yeah, you know what I mean. Okay, Richard. Just confused me for a minute there. I was just worried you were a little bit ahead. That's going to be a little sad, isn't it? Shop owner thought it was porn. I don't know how I'd react to most of that stuff from back in the day. These days, I think it's very, very of its time. That bit always makes me sort of flinch a little bit. She stabs at his face like that, because that is one of those things that is so easy to get wrong. Even with a blunted knife, that's going to hurt. I'll take your word for that, Richard. One of the interesting things with this, I mean, just you've seen this character go from being incredibly vulnerable to being, very capable of killing him. There's often this sort of latent violence in the characters in Lynch's films. The best example, I guess, would be Leland Palmer, who comes off as being this very kind of overwrought, almost comical character for a lot of the time. When he's going through his stages of grief, he's like bursting out into song and dance and this kind of stuff spontaneously. But when you see him kind of like turn, it's terrifying. And she's got like these little kind of aspects of Frank. There's a sort of implication in some respects, either that it is just a latent thing in everybody, or that this stuff, this act of violence, is almost contagious. I've definitely not seen the original, by the way. And he's back in the closet. Now here's Frank. I think with Leland, as well as Ray Wise, plays him with such sympathy when not possessed, yet in Firewalk with Me he plays him with such devilish glee. Yeah, yeah. And I think it's because the mask sort of slipped by that point. Yes, it's a prequel, but the audience was already kind of aware of who he was. So yeah, they could do that. And Ray Wise is he's not a bad actor by any means. I think he's been doing a lot of kind of like very kind of hardcore Christian films over the last few years. Cristiano Brothers and that kind of stuff, and Pure Flicks. Doesn't he just manage to get that kind of like just it's just this edge of madness, and like he's kind of just on the wrong side of that, that kind of ledge. But as psychotic as he comes across, you always imagine there's so much further he could go, and that's what makes it scary, at least for me. It's just so weird, isn't it? The whole thing that's going on with him, with the mask and the weird sort of. Well, I suppose you could literally describe him as a motherfucker. That's kind of seems to be his fantasy. He's one of those guys. So it's quite a so often a really striking kind of level of perversity which comes with David Lynch's films. I mean, it's rarely, you know, particularly explicit, but it's just the kind of tone of it, apart from anything else, and just how kind of ramped up it is. Oh, okay. Hello, DC. You take care, Simon. See you again soon. It would have been interesting, I think. Yeah, Kenneth Welsh does a great job in that. I think Dennis Hopper would have been an interesting choice. I imagine he would have been way, way, way too expensive though. Hello, Collector Adam. Oh, you enjoy your evening out. It's an example of just terrible, terrible writing. But I imagine Disney are feeling the pinch after that one. I mean, they made their money back, but they made nowhere near as much as they wanted to out of that series. Particularly since Solo tanked so damn hard. Which is ironic, really, because it was by no means the worst of the films. I would happily give that to Rise of Skywalker by a long shot. Kenneth Welsh has been in a lot of things. He's bounced around and done a lot of stuff. He's always been one of those actors that's kind of, pops up here or there, but it's never really been kind of huge. Now let's talk about a fourth trilogy. They'll have to go some way to actually mend some bridges. If they're even wanting to do that. But they fucked everybody off with Rise of Skywalker. They really did. The fans of the sequel trilogy hated that film, and the only joy that anybody got out of it was kind of sticking its fingers up at Last Jedi, which ironically I think is a significantly better film than Rise of Skywalker, despite its transgressions. Because I look at Last Jedi, I can still see a film. If you divorce yourself from the whole kind of attachments that you would have to Star Wars and that kind of stuff, and just watch it as a thing in its own right, it's not the most awful thing out there by a long shot, but it kind of it wrought a lot of destruction for it as a trilogy along the way, and that's the biggest problem with it. But it was only partially responsible for the mess that was Rise of Skywalker. You're probably safer doing that. Just because Disney decree certain things to be canon and not doesn't necessarily mean that the fans have to. I don't think George Lucas would object. For all my complaints about George Lucas, he's often been interested in sort of working with people who are creating stuff derivative of his work. So. There's not many of the old school films from my childhood that I'm particularly interested in seeing expanded upon, be it Ghostbusters, Star Wars, whatever. I haven't really got much hopes for the new one. Certainly no excitement. It's a new version of D'Artagnan and the Muskehounds. Okay. I see, often with things like that, whether it be the like kind of like the new Inspector Gadget, yada yada yada. I'm less offended by those because those are, intrinsically aimed at a very young audience. It was when kind of like this stuff came out. And for them to do it again, to some extent, I don't mind them reinventing that sort of stuff. Maybe that's just because I've sort of left that stuff behind. But when you got stuff like, I don't know, kind of like stuff that you were more appreciative of in your early teens and so on, it's a lot harder to let go of that stuff. It's a lot harder to let go of something like Ghostbusters. I think the only reason I wasn't more offended by the 2016 Ghostbusters was because I loved the first one. I loved it then, I love it now. The second one, not nearly as much. And when I reviewed 2016 Ghostbusters, I was very much kind of like, it's a bit, yeah, that's all I got from it. The first time I watched it was, it was a film of meh. It didn't rile me up particularly. I just found it very tedious. If they dare touch Ulysses 31, there'll be murders. You got 15 minutes in, turned off. I'd be happy to watch Battle of the Planets again. That was one from my very young days. See, I mean, I sat through the film and I walked out of there. I wasn't angry. I wasn't like kind of like upset with it. I was just like, there's a couple of hours gone. Pretty much. That's the overwhelming feeling I had left from it. I love all this chat about the different types of beer in this film. Jeffrey likes his Heineken, which kind of suggests he's either pretentious or has kind of like supposedly a more sophisticated taste, I guess. This is America and it is a foreign beer. Where the father's going like kind of like, I like Bud. Fairly standard US off-the-shelf beer. But then you've got Frank, who's Pabst Blue Ribbon. Which, as I understand it, is like kind of like, the most basic of the basic. I would assume that's kind of like the Carling Black Label of America. Come on, ladies, move that furniture. Frankie's Hobgoblin. You would find that too hoity-toity. It's just it's more of this sort of like kind of really inane kind of entertainment that these people consume. Do get the feeling that David Lynch has a real contempt for a lot of the kind of entertainment that people consume, apparently willingly. What time is climbing for dollars only? Yes. A lot of little furtive glances in this scene. You will never sell physical media. I don't tend to. Occasionally, I'll have a little bit of a clear out because I'll buy stuff occasionally that was probably ill judged. However, I have a lot of films in my collection that are not films that I would say that I particularly like at all. But some of them I'll keep because they have, you know, some relevance in my collection. Funny enough, one of the things I really don't tend to do is buy a lot of TV series. I have a few, but not many. I used to, but I've always found that it ends up taking an awful lot of space up on my shelves that is unnecessary because half of them I won't go to watch again. When I have Breaking Bad on DVD, the entire Monkey series, plus the episodes that were redubbed and all that kind of stuff, and I have I have Max Headroom, the TV series, up there. But aside from that, most of it's just films. And TV series end up taking up so much goddamn space. It's like, 30 odd bloody DVDs worth of space, and you kind of go, it's a bit much. Plus, because of the time commitment, if you're going to sit down and watch it, you tend to watch it from beginning to end. And you got something like Breaking Bad, that's a long time to do. But it is a series I'm going to have to watch again at some point. Really enjoyed that series. And I think it's partly because it's like with David Lynch. The characters in something like Breaking Bad are not two dimensional. They're not straightforward good guys, and they're not straightforward bad guys. And so it's so well written in terms of kind of how it plays with all that stuff. How many series of Monkey did they make? It was 2 series. But they never got rid of Pigsy. They recast Pigsy in the second season, and that's because the actor. They suddenly had a very fast turnaround because the first series got really, really popular. So they had a fast turnaround, and they couldn't get the original actor from the first series. So they had to recast, and the horse was always a character, but then they had it take human form in the second series. But it was suggested in the first that it could take human form. So there was 2 series, and I think it was like about 24 episodes, 22, 24 episodes each one. You have 11 different media releases of Suspiria alone. That's a lot, even for me. I mean, I've got like about 4 different versions of Eraserhead, for instance. So I'd love to collect Laserdisc and stuff like that, but that's I wouldn't have room for that. I was looking at getting this film on the Criterion Collection version, But as it was like it was about 25 quid, which is not too bad for a Criterion. But it's region 1 only, and it makes it really difficult to. I say region 1, region A only, and that makes it difficult for me to play. I can figure out ways of doing it. I've got a piece of software that will play multi-region DVDs, but you lose all the menus and stuff like that. So it kind of makes the Criterion collection a bit of a moot point, to say the least. And that's the one thing that people don't get, is that when you're playing off of a PC, for instance, the regionalisation actually comes through the software, not the actual device itself. Unlike DVDs, where I could have 2 DVD drives and I can region select each one. It's funny, I was discussing Suspiria with one of the lecturers at work, and because he'd got round to seeing the remake version and apparently really enjoyed it, which I do as well. I think it's a very worthy remake. Very different film, different enough to make it worthwhile. It doesn't replace the original, it just does something different with it, which I think is, kind of fair play. But I'm trying to persuade him to go see the original as well. It's a very different film. Blues are so tied down with that region coding. It's really annoying. So I don't think you can get a region-free Blu-ray player for it, like for your PC and stuff, for instance. I think that's... at least I haven't found one. You can get the kind of entertainment unit style. That's not too hard. It's just, you're paying for it. But internal Blu-rays on a PC are a lot harder to find. You got this moment in this film where she's doing this little monologue. Very typically kind of like very typically David Lynch, with that certain sense of nostalgia to some extent. I think the regionalisation of Blu-rays and DVDs is such bullshit. Annoys the fuck out of me. It's specifically designed to benefit only one set of people, and that's the distributors. It's not even the distributors, it's the rights holders. The distributors would be happy, kind of like Region Zero, because they can sell them across the world. And I was having this discussion with Mirko, who does, who got me to do those Blu-ray extras and that kind of stuff. And it's things like, I said to him, it's a shame that this one doesn't have like English subtitles and stuff. It doesn't seem hard to do. And he was like, it was more to do with the fact that it would potentially kind of put that tiny bit of competition on other markets, and that's why they couldn't do it. You sort of go, that's just bullshit, isn't it? Saw your PC on Facebook because you had a buzzing issue. Did you build it yourself? Yes, I did. It's not very hard work, really. It's just it takes a bit of time and a bit of effort to kind of source all your bits and pieces. The hardest thing about building a PC is more to do with matching up the parts, making sure you got the right kind of memory, making sure you got the right kind of motherboard for your processor, that kind of stuff. Once you figure that shit out, it's not complicated. Because, for all the complaints that Windows gets, it's incredibly intuitive. So it's a case of, you build your system, you install the OS, and the OS takes care of about 90% of the things. It's pretty cool. It's the eternal problem of collecting media, isn't it? When a really posh version comes out, and I never understood why they're kind of like going, well, you're so limited when you kind of sell somebody a DVD. This is part of the reason why they want to go digital entirely. It's because then you're sort of essentially renting it, but look at how many people collect, and when they do, they usually have 2 or 3 versions of any particular film that they particularly like. I mean, I own 2 versions of Salo, for God's sake. It's like, and that's not a film I would call entertaining. Oh, I'm not anti-digital. Don't get me wrong when I say that. Digital has its place, usually as partly for convenience, because let's face it, having all of this stuff takes up room and all that kind of thing. But being able to sort of like lay in bed and watch a movie on a tablet, that kind of stuff is very, very useful. Sometimes it's just easier to go, right, okay, I'll go on Amazon and kind of look through my library. Physical media tends to be, in my experience, a much higher quality experience. So, apart from anything else, plus the extras that you get on it and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that you've got a secure collection apart from anything else. Nobody's going to take this stuff away from you, other than potentially a bailiff, and quite frankly, they would look at most DVD collections and go, it's not worth the effort, even if there's rare stuff in there, because physical media doesn't exactly swap hands for very, very high amounts of money for the most part. I think the biggest thing to always remember when it comes to the difference between physical media and digital media is what's been highlighted there, is you don't own the digital copies. And that's a big, big part of the argument, is digital copies can be taken away from you easily or altered. If for whatever reason the law changes in the country and Amazon can't stream a particular version of a film, because some draconian government comes in and changes the rules on what you're actually allowed to consume at home in terms of those things, you may get an edited version. And I've seen versions changed in an alleged upgrade, which I didn't ask for as well, which means that prior versions go missing. So you lose that kind of cataloguing, if you like. Physical media, generally speaking, a few copies will survive here and there. if you haven't already got it. I like how she's sort of, yeah, I looked for you in the closet tonight, like she was expecting him to be in there. It's how perverse this little world has gotten. Time for a refreshing of the beer. Be back in a second. The thing with the whole kind of digital thing is, everything's gone that way now. It is going that way. Your music's going that way. Your computer games are going that way. Your kind of like visual media, TV, films, that kind of stuff is going that way. And a lot of it tends to be quite centralized as well in sites like Amazon. And all it takes is for Amazon to suddenly go away, and you will lose everything. And if you don't think that's a likely thing, and kind of like just think of Google Books or Ultraviolet, where a lot of this stuff just disappeared into the ether. You lost it. And Amazon isn't guaranteed to be permanent by any means. Just takes the right set of circumstances and they would go away. One wonders, kind of like how much of that stuff would go away forever. If they're the only ones that have got it. And the other side of it is more like kind of like how much care they actually have for that stuff. Because when you buy something on digital, it means it's stored on their servers, right? That's just a matter of course. It has to be stored on a server over there, which means that essentially this thing is taking up real estate. Not that much, but it is taking up real estate in the servers, on the drives. So this thing is essentially costing them money. So at what point do they get to the point where they go, well, this thing only gets downloaded or watched 4 or 5 times a year, and it's costing us X amount to actually have it on there? Or we need to free up some space, and these things are kind of like the lowest priority, and then you lose them, and you'll have no comeback on that. And these companies don't care, and the studios don't care themselves. So for all the MGMs and all that kind of stuff in the world, or Paramount or Sony or Disney, they've had a very, very bad track record in throughout history of really kind of preserving their creations throughout the years. In the early days of cinema, the film was often recycled. So they would film something, take it out, do the rounds, and then at the end of the day kind of go, right, okay, now I need the money back. So the film stock would be recycled essentially. And I cannot remember the estimated percentage of what films actually survived from back in the day. You know, you're talking late 1800s through to about 1960, right? A lot of that stuff went away, especially during wartime, because they went as valuable metals and stuff in that film. So they just destroyed it for the war effort. But film has never really had that kind of that love from the industry that actually makes it to preserve. And it's only ever really been the big earners, the really kind of high profile stuff that they've felt the need to preserve. So no end of stuff just went into the ether. See, Greg, my opinion has always been more kind of like I want to be able to support companies like Arrow and the likes, because they do a great service in my opinion. Yeah, you know, Arrow's had its kind of failings on occasions, but that happens. For the most part, I think of them as being a very valuable company in the types of stuff that they do. Particularly because the types of stuff that they do are generally kind of poorly regarded by the general public and those who might wish to curate. You got stuff like the Shameless collection and things like that. You know, films that without folk like you or me buying those things would disappear, and that'd be a shame. I don't want to go back to those kind of like pre-1960s days where film was generally regarded as something less than an art form, in whatever kind of form it sort of pops up as, be it like, you know, a trashy slasher film or something like that. I think the world is far richer for the presence of those kind of films. I wouldn't 100% agree on that, Greg. Simply because I mean, yes, they do recycle some stuff, but usually the packages sort of come out with, even the most basic ones come out with extras and things like that on there, which make them worthwhile. And they tend to be working with a pool of stuff that is going to have a limited appeal. So you know, there's costs and benefits to them. They're a company at the end of the day. I think the collector's world would be a lot smaller without them, or at least a lot less well off. There aren't too many companies that really do put that much attention to it, but you know, companies like XS, which are kind of German company, do some interesting stuff, and I've been lucky to be able to add a little bit into their work, which has been very exciting. I wish I could just put the Mountain of the Cannibal God thing up on YouTube, but it would get struck down, not by them, but by the various kind of rights holders, most likely. So I'd need to completely re-edit it. I love that camera that he has in the shoebox on the dashboard. It does get a little bit more hokey as it goes along. It deliberately so, this film does. There's never too many versions of Profondo Rosso. I do enjoy talking with Greg. We've only really done that one conversation, but Greg has a slightly different kind of approach to the films than I do, and I find that quite fascinating to engage with. Germany is a bit of a weird country when it comes to these things because they have stricter censorship laws than just about anywhere that I know, other than places like Saudi Arabia. Sex, anything goes more or less, but violence is very heavily censored over there. And I believe that Dawn of the Dead is still censored over there, as a for instance. I would love to do a deep dive on German censorship. Current modern day, i.e. from the 70s onwards. Oh, you're welcome, Greg. I quite agree. It's quite a telling scene with this, because he kisses Laura Dern in this, and he's got this confidence that he never had because he's been with his Isabella Rossellini's character. There's this sort of building the characters right throughout the film, and that's what makes it part of what makes it such a wonderful film is the characters are so well handled. They start off, and they're set up kind of so you can recognise what they are and what they represent, and then you can see how the various events change them. I would like a really good copy of The Beyond. I have my issues with Lucio Fulci as a filmmaker, but some of his films are really great, and that is probably my favourite. Is The Beyond. I'll skip New York Ripper if they do one though, but it's a film I find pretty repellent. And that's not one of those kind of like, oh my god, it's repellent. It's more like I watch that film and I do wonder about the motivations. .4K is really of use for screens that are, I think, 36-inch and above. Then you would notice the difference. Any smaller than that, you probably wouldn't. Does it? Okay. I've never understood the fandom kind of love of that movie, but to each their own. But I'm watching it. I often watch it from a slightly different perspective than a lot of people. I think when it comes to that whole resolution thing, I can't really see how anything above 4K is going to be any use. I mean, and 4K is only useful if you've got a really big screen. I said 36. I think it's actually more like 46-inch screen. You need a big ass screen for that kind of to notice the quality difference, from what I understand. Um, but if they're going with 8K, it's like, who has a screen the size of a cinema screen? It's a feeling. I think for most people, 4K is little more than a marketing ploy. They want people to upgrade the equipment and all that kind of stuff, and that's one of the biggest challenges to the industry of home entertainment. Is now we've got to a point where the pitch quality isn't going to get much better. Now you're just throwing numbers at us. You know what I mean? I think when it comes to that sort of when it comes to that kind of stuff, what the next steps should be is probably kind of like thinking about the delivery of this stuff in terms of how extras work. Can you make them an interactive thing, that sort of thing. Being a bit imaginative about how these films are delivered to you. Well, funny enough, one of the things that Amazon actually kind of gets right in some respects is that X-ray option, which kind of gives you like kind of factoids and stuff like that about the film as you go along. So it's supplementary to kind of commentary, things like that. That's the definition of analog, though, isn't it, Greg? When you're talking a good quality film stock has a look and a feel that you can't get through a screen, be it analog or digital screen. Yeah, I mean, I totally get that, Iris, but I mean, even just the resolution, when you get to a certain height of resolution, it can actually break the film. And when you're looking at an image that was kind of like never supposed to be seen in quite that definition, then all the seams become obvious. And that's not to say that everything's got to be blurry, yada yada yada, but you just look at what was it, The Hobbit, the second Hobbit film, or was it the first one, where they filmed it at a much higher frame rate, for instance, and super high definition, and people found it to be very off-putting because it looked like a TV series rather than a movie. The set became very obvious as being a set. And this push for the technology and higher resolution and all that kind of stuff sort of runs up against the fact that human beings are very good at kind of filling in any information that's missing, and in fact, to some degree, that actually kind of helps the film. Oh, I agree, Greg. You look at Evil Dead. I mean, who needs to see the first Evil Dead in 4K, ultra high definition resolution? You know, it's like when you do that, then suddenly all the tricks, all the bits and pieces that kind of, you know, construct the film become kind of very apparent. There you go, Pabst Blue Ribbon. He's a Pabst Blue Ribbon man. That's frame rate, yes, but these things are all kind of interplay. Uh, there was a thing with the with the resolution as well with that, which was like really kind of high. But when you start messing with these things, it changes the look and the feel of what is being presented. It's like with this film, we've got a really quite nice resolution, but there is a softness to the image which is quite forgiving. Yeah, that's the one thing. Evil Dead, not most people who watch the Evil Dead, they'll know it's a cheap film and all that kind of stuff. But you don't really appreciate quite how lo-fi it is until you've seen it in kind of like 4K. Yeah. And it's not to shit on the film because I love that film. But everything becomes obvious. Star Trek Next Generation, when they released this super high resolutions of those, and then suddenly it went from looking almost cinematic to looking really cheap and nasty. Just crisp. If the resolution is beyond what you can see, how would it affect you? I would say, what's the point of it, for one thing, if that is the case? I'm not quite sure that is the case. However, the higher resolution you kind of jam in there, it will kind of, depending on your type of screen and all that kind of stuff, will change to some degree. Although not so much on a smaller screen, but it will kind of affect certain aspects of what is kind of presented to you, but not necessarily in a well, not even likely in a beneficial way. Dean Stockwell, and this is great. Evil Dead in 4K is a 4:3 presentation, as it should be. It is what it is. I don't think it was ever filmed in. Was it ever? It wasn't widescreen at all, was it? Because it was. Yeah, there was a cinema release, but I think it was intended, as much as anything, to go to video eventually. They were working on a real budget with that one. Very, very tiny budget. Jack Nance, yep. The great Jack Nance. Tragic loss when he went. One of my favourite bits of Harry Dean Stanton in David Lynch is in The Return, where it's just him sat in the trailer park on the porch of his trailer singing. Just one of those moments. It was always one of those bitter-sweet experiences with the Return. And seeing these actors heavily aged. Some of them literally on death's door. The Log Lady's Goodbye was just that was a tough one. Not many things bring me close to tears. That certainly did. There's a fish in a percolator. Oh, he's such a bastard, isn't he? Don't get actors like HDS nowadays. Well, you do get, you know, some actors will come out of it. He was kind of unique in his own way, and he always played that everyman so damn naturally. There were always interesting characters that he played. I always think of Brad Dourif in some respects as being kind of like a kind of one of the Nicolas Cages of the world in some respects, because he always plays these kind of very outrageous type of characters, although he doesn't necessarily kind of like have that sort of highly coloured kind of performance in the same way that Nicolas Cage does. It's not far off of that. He's certainly kind of like turned a notch up on the characteristics. So his characters tend to feel a bit more real, less comic book. But they're both quite extreme actors in some respects. But a very good character, actually. You're quite right, Greg. This is another one of those moments where you got like Dean Stockwell singing into the inspection lamp. Yeah. All this kind of artifice that David Lynch loves to indulge in, and again he did it in a couple of other films, in fact. Most notably Mulholland Drive, where you had the lip syncing and that kind of stuff, and it's not real. And just got another example of it here. He loves to kind of both blend and tear down the walls of these kind of realities and make it obvious. Roy Orbison was amazing. It took me a long time to appreciate Roy Orbison, but an extraordinary artist, to say the least. It's always a shame that the Travelling Wilburys never, lasted longer, because Roy Orbison died not long after they were formed. But what a fantastic collection of musicians that was. I wish I'd appreciated it more at the time. I went to see the point I really came to appreciate Roy Orbison was when I was at college, which would have been about like 97, 98, and had to review a couple of theatre pieces. I love it. I fuck anything that moves. I had to go review a couple of theatre pieces, so I went to see De Fledermaus and the Roy Orbison story. And when I saw the Roy Orbison story, and it's the first time I'd really kind of like, sat down to listen to the music and find out a bit about the man himself. And I was just like, holy shit, that's quite something. And from that point, I learned to appreciate the music. It's one of the wonderful things when you get these biopics. They can be a little, or kind of like the stage equivalent, if you like. Yeah, they're not necessarily 100% true to life, but it does give you a bit of an insight into kind of the people behind the music, and sometimes it can really lift everything about your appreciation of their careers. Not entirely sure, Blue Iris. What did you think of De Fledermaus? I'm not a big fan of operettas in general. They tend to be a bit kind of cloistered in their own kind of time of creation. But I didn't hate it. It was just not much of it stuck in my brain. The character of Frank is just this epitome of lust, isn't he? He's just like this unbridled lust and anger. He's like all the worst elements of humanity, and it's not to say that lust is necessarily a terrible thing, but unbridled lust most certainly can be. And I think that's kind of, really sort of pushed through his a lot of his dialogue in the terms of, it's like, a baby wants to fuck kind of thing, just the way he talks about sex. It's just, it's vicious. My opinion on that stuff is not something that you should take as a way to not to discourage you from liking it. I can only really sort of talk from my point of view when I saw those things and what it sort of felt like for me. If you find joy in that stuff, if you find joy in Gilbert and Sullivan, and I fucking hate Gilbert and Sullivan, then more power to you. There's enough in life that is so shit and miserable that don't let anybody kind of talk you out of your desire or love of any particular art form. So Frank's is a parody of those things, isn't he? Of like kind of lust and anger, and even his anger is a kind of almost lustful act. It's like a lust for violence. Well, I'm glad you like this stuff. Is this film approaching dream nightmare logic? I'd say not from my point of view. I think it is sort of grounded in a stylized reality, but not necessarily a dream. Everything that happens in this film does make sense on a kind of conscious level. What I would say with it is a heightened reality, but it's not a kind of like thing where certain actions are sort of relocated, dislocated, moved around, or even kind of particularly skewed in anything other than how extreme they are. I kind of agree there. He's always had that kind of, even before this film, he's always had that aspect to his characters. Whether you're looking at like kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 or even Apocalypse Now, his character in that is a very kind of like heightened type of character. So how much of it is people, directors deliberately going, I want Frank Booth back? Or how much of it is him, his acting style? I'm not entirely sure. But I can totally understand why, a director would like kind of want to try to bring a little bit of that into their films, because it's a very intense character. People, like I said, I mentioned Nicolas Cage earlier on, and a lot of people sort of feel like Nicolas Cage is like kind of like this super out there kind of character performer. He's a long way from being the only one. There's just different styles of it, and Dennis Hopper's acting style is very much in that kind of vein. Yeah. I love that we get to see, the fact that he's starting to realise kind of how far down the rabbit hole he's being dragged. It's another common theme in David Lynch's films where characters get sort of dragged into these from one world into another. They sort of flirt with the dangerous kind of aspect of stuff. Like Laura Palmer with the drugs and kind of hanging around with the bad boys, that kind of stuff, until she gets dragged down into this world, which is far more dangerous when you've got like Jacques Renault and all that kind of stuff involved. And then eventually her father, when he is revealed to be who he is. So it's always kind of an interesting aspect in David Lynch's films when he kind of does that kind of thing. Because he does it really, really well. And you get these moments where the characters sort of realise quite how far they've fallen. And as weird as David Lynch's films get, there's always a very, very human aspect to them. As outrageous as the characters can suddenly, occasionally be. It's not. They're never completely removed from being human, if you know what I mean. In fact, they're actually they are always incredibly human. Just a little bit kind of tweaked and raised up and made a little bit sort of more extreme. But the stories are always human. Even Eraserhead, which is the one that most people would look at and go, that's just bizarre. And it's not. It's a very, very human story. It's a very specific character study that's going on. Interesting. funny enough, when you're talking about like the Nicolas Cage type actors and stuff, with Nicolas Cage, he's made, like, say, a somewhat of a resurgence recently. And he's actually making interesting films that really do kind of harness his kind of energy as an actor. Where, be it like kind of films like Mandy or The Colour Out of Space. I'm really glad to see him making films that are much more suited to him these days. Because I think he is a genuinely interesting actor. It's just like he gets put in films that he shouldn't be in a lot of the time. Oddly, one of the most grounded film performances he's given, as far as I can remember, for a long time at least, was probably The Rock. Michael Bay explosion, orgasm of violence kind of movie. Cage just needs the right material. Yeah. He's a very extreme kind of performer, generally speaking. He can do quiet, and I wish he could dial it back a lot more. Because you look in Colour Out of Space, his performance in that ranges really right across his range, from the kind of very down to earth, very normal, very quiet, to the extreme Cage. And it's fascinating for it. Oh, I agree. He has made some bad films, and a lot of that was due to his personal situation. Apart from anything else, he was taking anything he could because he'd spent all his money, I don't know, on pink-coloured leopard cubs and stuff like that. That's not literally what he did, but he did. He went on a big spending bender and lost all of his money. I think, Richard, I think he's sort of started to find his feet again. Over the last 10 years, he's started to find his feet again. And that's a good thing to see. Left Behind was a particularly bad choice, but no doubt he just did it for the money. And the reason why they got someone like Nick Cage in that was because the original Left Behind was an appalling movie. If you think the remake was bad, the original was even worse. The one with Kirk Cameron in it. And they needed a big name actor, a proper big name actor for it, so they just threw money at him. He can do restrained well, like adaptation. Yeah, absolutely he can. He just doesn't do it very often. Like I said, Colour Out of Space has a real good example of the various ranges of Nicolas Cage from kind of quarter cage to full cage. I love all these. I've said about the soundtrack in this film before, about just like the scene where he's pulling up to the house, the little orchestral refrain that's going on, and all that kind of stuff. It's very old-fashioned. Oh, Iris. There's an original Left Behind, yes. Yeah, the Nick Cage one was a remake. I believe you'll be able to find it online if you're really interested in watching it. But it is astonishingly bad. Yeah, you could say it that way, Kerry. the 1 to 10 can kind of vary as to where it actually starts and where it ends, though. I'd say that the 1 to 10 has to be kind of like, the should be from naturalistic to hyper expressionist. It's probably a good way to put it. They know how to please their audience. Well, apparently the original Left Behind, the financiers of it were absolutely kind of pissed off with the filmmakers, because the filmmakers had talked it up as being this really, really kind of like a big budget film that they were going to get big names and stuff in it. So eventually, I like I say, I think they got Kirk Cameron. It was from a sitcom. I think it was Growing Pains or something like that, US sitcom. And that was their big name, was him, pretty much. I think there was a couple of moderate sort of names in there, but that was about it. But it was a real lo-fi kind of piece of crap at the end of the day. I don't get the feeling this was in Inland Empire as well, this piece of music. It sounds very similar. I know it's the same composer and all, but... Oh, there's no doubt that Nick Cage definitely went through a massive ego phase, which is when he did a lot of his most eccentric stuff. But I think Nick Cage needs a director who is strong enough to tell him what he wants and actually kind of rein him in, and then let him go whenever is appropriate. Well, it depends which version you're talking about, but yeah, both are pretty. It's as much to do, I think, yes, I would say it's a bad film. The subject matter aside, it's a bad film. Wild at Heart. Thoughts on Sailor. It's been such a long time since I've seen it, so but it's a pretty wild character in terms of kind of how the character sort of presents on screen. Goes from kind of I would say Sailor in that is like a good version of Frank Booth in some respects. He's like on the opposite end of the morality scale to some degree. Yes, Richard. I would say by all means watch it if you want to watch it. I don't know how you'll feel about it, to be honest with you. It's not a bad film in terms of the sort of bad films that we watch and enjoy. It is hardcore US evangelical Christian story. Obviously, it's about the rapture. So you have to kind of ask yourself, how much can I stomach that sort of preaching? Because that's what it is. It's preaching. Willem Dafoe does the overacting in Wild at Heart. Yes. I mean, there's a lot of very, very large performances in that particular film. Willem Dafoe does. He is a good example of an actor that can really kind of do both ends pretty damn well. It's awkward, isn't it? Isn't Kevin Sorbo in Left Behind? He was in God's Not Dead. He played the ranting atheist professor. Who has a deathbed confession as to he's been run over by a car. It's tasteful stuff, I can tell you. I think they made about 3 God's Not Dead films. It's pretty awful. Although, from what I understand, the last one that they did was probably the most the least extreme of the lot. In that it'd be watchable by someone like me, as a for instance, without feeling like I've just been kind of like twatted round the ass with the Bible for 3 hours. And there's an image for you. Take it to bed with you tonight. A good copy of Going Coconuts on YouTube. Watched it last week and it was beyond bad. I don't know with Donnie and Marie Osmond that it's necessarily the stuff that I would find offensive. I'd find it a little, maybe twee and a little kind of tambourine rattling, possibly. Films like God's Not Dead are actively offensive because it's so full of lies, it's unreal. And it's only ever designed to preach to the choir. There's sometimes they go, these films are supposed to kind of reach out to people, and it's not at all. It's literally designed to just affirm people's kind of ideas about other people. And that's it. Oh, Gary, that's awful. Oh, Saving Christmas, that was just... That was more cringe than offensive. See, Saving Christmas I don't find offensive. Not like God's Not Dead. Saving Christmas is just a very kind of... That again is the tambourine rattling kind of thing. There's plenty of lies in it, no doubt about it. But it's kind of following the bog standard Kirk Cameron thing. It wouldn't be first on my list, Greg. Funny thing is, because it being the US, you would imagine most of the cast of Growing Pains would be Christian, evangelical, whatever, kind of some stripe of Christianity, for the most part. Kirk Cameron was so obnoxious that everybody hated him by the time he left. Oh, Neil Breen. I've been asked about Neil Breen before. I don't think I could find much joy in Neil Breen's films. Some people love it because they're so crazy. I find it at almost a pain level of cringe. Hello, Minty. We are about the last 12 minutes of a super long version of Blue Velvet. Oh. I must admit, I find it hard to watch Charlton Heston films, knowing kind of what he's like, or was like. New shoes. So you got a proto Leah Johnson here, haven't you? Thank you, Greg. There's so many people sort of go, Neil Breen, oh, it's great. I mean, I watch a lot of Red Letter Media and Letter Media. Love his films, and that's fine. I've got no problem with people enjoying that stuff. I personally do not see the attraction. It other than the weird sort of car crash mentality that you'll get from watching a film like that. It's just too embarrassing. I feel embarrassed for the filmmaker that he's showing his ass so heavily. Danzig made a film worse than Fred Durst. Wow. I can't say I've seen either of their films. I enjoy Red Letter Media. It's humorous, and they go into their films with enough knowledge to actually kind of make it interesting to watch, but with plenty of humour along the way. I enjoy their stuff. I think a lot of people probably watch it more for the jokes than they do the kind of like film review content. But particularly Jay is very cine literate. Mike is in a different way in some respects, but you got all these personalities with very different kind of like points of views and approaches to the various films that they watch. So it makes it interesting enough to not just have to be just about the jokes. And they're enthusiastic, so that's always a little contagious. I wish I had half of their viewers, though. Maybe I don't. Not really that worried. Oh, The Fanatic. I know that one. I haven't seen it, but I have seen bits of it. John Travolta's a bad, bad actor. Uh, the Fanatic is definitely one of the most misjudged films, and particularly with the performance that I've ever kind of even had partial experience of. I wouldn't 100% agree, John. I think, sorry, Greg, John Travolta, I think he does try, but I honestly, I think so much of the time, there's very few performances of his that I can look at and go, that I can point to that states that would show that he's a particularly talented actor. And particularly as he gets older, he doesn't really have that kind of you know, the same kind of good looks that he had when he was really young. I mean, Face Off is just kind of a bit out there, but it's not too bad. If you've ever seen Battlefield Earth, then I do wonder with him whether or not he is one of those actors that really does need a terrific director of real actors based. Bye bye, Frank. That was easy. Um, whether he needs a really good director behind him to kind of steer him. Battlefield Earth is beyond terrible. Yeah, it's another one of those films that I struggle to get through. A lot of people find it very, very funny, but I always feel a little bit embarrassed for everyone involved. I more enjoy watching people laugh at it than I do trying to laugh at it myself. Old Elron. Yeah, Face Off sort of works. It's not my favourite film by a long shot. No particular desire to watch it again, but it is kind of fun watching them try to outgoof each other. It's kind of entertaining. Feel sorry for Barry Pepper, killed his career seemingly. It happens. Such is the joy of being an actor. Is to get this kind of return to the picket fence America at the end of the film. I swear they reused a bit of this soundtrack in Blue Velvet. I mean, in Inland Empire. Gonna have to double check that. It's a fake ass bird. Robin, yes. It's one of those moments that I kind of look at and go, is it deliberately looking a little fake, or is it just because that's all they could manage? But again, you got the whole kind of thing. You've got this bird there, but it's got the bug in its mouth. There's a certain contrast of beauty and ugliness which goes on. And she got her son back. It's a very heartwarming story at the end of the day, despite all the kind of baby wants to fuck kind of stuff that goes on in this film. There's always that sentimentality in David Lynch's films, which kind of underlies everything. And, whether it's in the kind of 50s music or sort of iconography and, all that sort of stuff. But it's it never overpowers the film. It's kind of there as a sort of grounding for all the wildness and the violence that goes on, and the extremes that goes on. It's really good. But I hope you enjoyed that. I know I did. Interesting to see the fuller version. Oh dear. Is Angela Merkel out of power there yet? She's on her way out at the very least, isn't she? Hasn't a successor taken over? Dear, oh dear. Okay, we shall call it a day there. That's a long film, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed our chat and all that kind of stuff. So thank you to everyone, and I will remind you that the worst date movies ever episode that I was on is out there. I will try to remember to put another link out on Twitter and Facebook and those usual kind of outlets. Go watch that, and more importantly, go see some of the other stuff that's on there as well, because there's some very interesting little chats about different problematic movies, shall we say. So go check all that stuff out. It's well worth a listen. If you're working, you can listen. It's audio only, so you don't even have to be kind of sat there with a tablet in front of you. So if you can be working or whatever, or doing the cooking or doing the washing, walking the dog, whatever, you can listen to it. It's that kind of format. So but with that, I will say thank you very much for joining. And I should make one point. I think we're going to have to kind of go on a bi-weekly basis going forward, just because things have gone crazy at work, and I'm trying to get myself writing stuff, so I'll need a weekend to do that kind of stuff, and then a weekend to do this. I'm still sort of deciding exactly what's going on when and all that kind of stuff. The next one will be and let me just check the calendar. It will be the 16th of this month, and Kerry is joining me for a double bill. It is close to both of our birthdays, so we're going to be sharing an episode. Kerry's going to have a film. I'm going to have a film. I'm looking at a Cronenberg film, so not quite sure if it's going to be Videodrome or Rabid. Not entirely sure yet. Got to make that decision. Mine will probably be a bring your own media, but I will find a link to a cheap rental, which will be like, £3.50 or whatever to watch the film. So if you've got any preference between Videodrome or Rabid, then let me know, and I will try and kind of sway in one direction or the other. So GBH and Mad Foxes, that would be a good one. But that would be, I don't know, maybe that would be a Christmas or a New Year one. So take care, folks, and I will see you on the next stream. And of course, I will be on Facebook and Twitter if you wish to, I don't know, say something. Find me on the Ramble-Aholics particularly. Good night, guys. Have a great weekend.